So, as I said, Django was created just over 20 years ago. It was built by a bunch of guys who got sick of writing PHP and thought they needed a better programming language. And they went, Python's pretty cool, but there's no web frameworks for Python. They were employed in a town, I'm trying to remember now. It was not Kansas, but it was near there. Anyway, that's background you don't really need to know about. But there was a bunch of guys that were working for this newspaper site, and they went, how do we host all of our news articles really well? We need a framework to help us with that. They built this thing, and then the guy that owned the newspaper said, yeah, you can open source it, so they open sourced it, and then Django came into the world. And it's different in the sense that it's very opinionated. So the first thing you need to know about Django is that Django is incredibly opinionated on how you do things. It has a lot of information. It has a lot of tools to help you build very quickly. It is an exceptionally good tool for startups and people doing proof of concept work because you can smash out tooling incredibly quickly. It also scales very well. Instagram runs on Django REST framework. So their entire backend is Django REST framework. It has always been, so it gets pretty big. But it's performant. The thing that allows you to build fast is the fact that it is really heavily opinionated, and that is very evident in the tooling it provides for you. So a lot of how Django works is you will define classes which will extend from some tool, some meta class that Django gives you, and that meta class will interpret what your class looks like and use that to build an eventual set of instructions. So there's a whole lot of meta classes that will happen, and this will become quite obvious. Probably the first place to start is not on the user end, but down on the database end. So that's a Postgres database. Postgres is an elephant. We're going to be using SQLite today, just for today. So we have these things called models. What's a model? A model is an abstraction of, in Django, a model is an abstraction of a database. So think about your entity relationship diagrams. The table that you create, that's a model. So the model is the class that you will define, and the attributes or the fields that you put into that class will be the instructions that the meta class that you extend from. So the meta class in this case is called Django models.model. You will grab that model meta class, and that meta class will interpret what your class is and actually build database instructions off it. So it'll create the table in the database, it'll understand how to read, modify, update, everything to do with state management for that database entry. So you don't have to write any SQL ever, which means you can do shit quick. So that's positive. If you really need to get into the nitty-gritty of how the SQL's working, you can dump down to raw SQL and use raw SQL. 99.9% sure you will not do that. It'll have to be an extreme rare case. I think I've done it once in my entire Django career. It's not very likely. But if you need to, you can. And that prevents Django from having to become so complex that it can handle weird edge cases. If it's a weird edge case, then yeah, you just go use SQL. SQL exists. So for Django REST framework, the model is there. The model itself is how you interact with the data. That's not necessarily how you want the user to interact with the data. In Django, vanilla Django, you would have a form. A form is a way to abstract away what the data looks like. So your model defines the data, your form builds the instructions on how the user can interact with that. Forms are great if you've got HTML. We're not doing that, we're using JSON. So in that case, we're going to use a serializer. So serializer in the concept of Django REST framework is essentially the interface that you give to your user that defines how they can interact with the model in the models file. So that defines how it talks to the database. The serializer defines how the user talks to the model. Is that making sense? And we're going to go really into some nitty-gritty of how that works. I think I'm going to go. We're going to play around with models directly to understand how they kind of work, just to get a concept of how the Python code itself works with the model, and that hopefully will explain the rest of it. But tying those together is a thing called a view. If you think about, like, I don't know how familiar you are with the concept of like three-tier architecture. Like quite often there's a lot of computing problems are split into 3 steps. You'll see this all the time with things like ETL, MVC, those sorts of things. So you've got a segmentation in the application space of data, logic, and interface, essentially, or interaction. And that is in the MVC structure, it's model for data, view for logic, and C is the control layer, which is where the interface happens, the state interaction. In our space, we're not really caring about state because in the web world, that's the front end's job. Front end cares about state, back end cares about data, logic, process. So we're kind of not caring too much about state. So in this world, we're kind of going model for M, where our data sits, view for logic, where our logic sits, and then really it's the serializer that kind of defines the interface, but it's sort of a bit looser. But you've got that 3-way process. So the view is where we store our logic. So the logic here, depending upon what your use case is, can be incredibly simple because, so Django REST Framework specifically offers a lot of very generic tooling. So if you just have a model and you want to present that to the user as a default serializer and you don't want to muck around with that at all, you're just quite happy for all those fields to show up and that's fine. You can pretty much do 4 lines and get it done. It's not a lot of work. But if you want to modify the specifics of how that interaction happens, you can extend, you can override methods in your classes to define how particular stages might expand. And that's kind of where it's tricky. There's a little bit of complexity in there to know which ones, but once you kind of get the hang of it, it's going to take a little while because Django is a big thing. It's very opinionated. There's lots of parts. It's got the kitchen sink in there. So that'll once you kind of grok it, it speeds up a lot of stuff. So the view's where going back to this, the view's where the logic sits. The view defines how those things kind of come together really. So like how to understand those components and what restrictions and what additional manual or what additional extra logical steps you want to happen in that transaction. So that's really the definition. The URL exists as essentially just a mapping. So you're mapping what the path you're expecting to get from the browser. So when the client sends a request to the server, the path that it sends will define through a bunch of rules that you'll store in URL files how to map that incoming request, that incoming HTTP request, which view does it go to essentially. So this is a bunch of rules on how you route your incoming request. Views is how you process them. Serializers define how the user interacts or how you constrain the user's interaction with the model, which is your data, and the model defines the data. Is that kind of making sense? Would it be better if you actually saw some of it? Probably. If you've got your repo ready, I'll grab one, I'll open it up and have a look. Yeah, that's fine. Where's PyCharm? There it is. Big presentation mode. That looks better. That's the README. That's not going to help me. Give me my files. Oh, I hate it how it does this. File. Thing. No. File. I can't remember what it's called. No. All right, what am I looking for? I'm just going to exit this mode because it's not helping me. Where's exit presentation mode there? All right. Zoom, IDE, control, option equals. All right, is that better? Is that readable? Yep, happy? Cool. All right, let's have a look. So in your repo, currently, what you'll see is a bunch of directories. There should be a server directory. Oh, I mean, no, not that one, this server. And in here, have I got the wrong branch? Where am I at? Weird. Give me a second, use UV, check out. Hang on, give me a sec, I just need to reset this. Git reset head hard. Done. Git checkout. Use UV. All right, here we go. That's better. All right, in here, there's a, so how Django sets up by default. Actually, let me show you I'll show you a brand new vanilla Django installation, and we'll go from that. So new project, let's call this like vanilla, that's not how you spell vanilla. Vanilla Django. Yeah, sure, go. UV init dot, UV add Django, UV sync, source that, Django admin start project. Boom, all right. Oh, that's a lot, tree. So if I run tree, do you guys know what tree is? Hopefully. So tree is essentially a command that just shows you the structure of the folder I'm in, right? So this is a brand new Django installation. I've called this project. So we have a project directory. I should have called it server because that's what yours is called, but I wasn't thinking that smartly, so that's what I did. No, that's probably the first thing. The next bit is there's this thing called manage.py. Start app, my app. All right, so Django splits a few things up. Firstly, you have there's a directory that you create as part of your project. That's why I've used the word project. So as part of your project, you create a directory. You usually name this after the thing that you're building. And so in your case, there's a folder called server. Inside the folder called server, there's another folder called server. Inside that folder, you'll find these things. So server settings. That actually is way more sensible for the understanding it, because what you're looking at really is the settings for the server. So calling it server is really smart. I might do that for the rest of time after this after this session, because I think it's quite clever. So manage.py, that is Django's script tooling. So manage.py is a helper function that Django gives you. If I were to go Python, actually I'll show you a trick because I love this one. If you make manage.py executable, then you can just execute it like it's a script, and I think that's great. So manage.py, is that too small to read? It's pretty, it's all right? All right. So manage.py will give you all of these functions that you can use. There's a whole lot of them. So you can create your super user, you can change users' passwords, you can dump your data, you can load data from JSON files, you can migrate, make migrations and migrate. They're two things that you'll learn about because, as I said before, Django abstracts your database with models. And so to build the actual tables, you run a tool called migrate, which will create those tables on the database. If you modify your model, then it's no longer the same as the database. You run make migrations, so it will create a change set and apply that change set when you next run migrate. So you'll do that a lot. You'll learn about this very quickly. So it's got a bunch of tooling. Shell is quite fun. It opens up a Python prompt that has a lot of the Django stuff already configured for you, so you can just get in there and muck around with models. It's really, really, really useful for understanding what the data looks like. So I use it all the time when I'm mucking around with learning how a complex model might interact with another thing. When you get to like foreign keys, it becomes a lot easier to play with it in that way. Or doing like mathematical like summaries of things. So there's annotate and aggregate. So you can do aggregate queries where you can go, give me everything in this table and find me the max and min and the average. So that's quite useful in that space. Tree. And so I ran before start app, my app. So I've talked about the project directory, which is your server directory, which is where the settings for the entire application sit. But what Django refers to as apps are where you actually do your logical work. So you're not going to put your models in this project directory or in your server directory. You'll put them in this app module. And so the app module will have a bunch of files. Alphabetically, admin is where you put your admin code. So Django will provide out of the box a web-based administrative interface for your database tables. So you can log into that. You can inspect the table data that you've set up. You can edit it. You can create new entries. You can actually do a lot. It's quite a powerful tool. You can create like batch jobs in there if you really needed to. It's quite cool. But that's where you put those configurations. So the administration section will always go in admin.py. Apps.py, you don't need to worry about that too much. It's sort of a bit of a placeholder for most of the time. Like very rarely do you need to edit that. But we talked models. So models.py is where those models are going to sit. That's where your database definitions are going to go. Tests are where your tests are going to go. Views is where the views go. We'll also be creating a serializers.py, and that's where the serializers are going to go. And that's the common structure. This is sort of part of that opinionated sort of thing that I was talking about. Like if you were to use a tool like Flask, which I think you might have had experience with in your classes, like Flask doesn't tell you how to do it. Flask just says, yeah, write some files, call them whatever. Put whatever you want in them, we don't really care. So as someone who's now worked in corporate world where you have a varying degree of contractors who work with you, who provide you with code that is of a varying degree of quality and a varying degree of standards adherence, having a really opinionated framework, like if you were to start, so Flask, you can smash something out really quickly. It doesn't give you this boilerplate. It doesn't give you authentication out of the box. It doesn't give you cores. It doesn't give you, like Django will give you a lot of things. And that's kind of, historically, before Django existed, that was never seen. Like no one really did that. Like Rails and Django were the first two to bring it out, and they kind of came in the same year. So before then, the world really sort of thought the idea of telling me how to do something was against what software development was about. And afterwards, people think that now. Like Node guys think this is stupid. So, they like building their own stuff and releasing packages and, rewriting them every 2 years. But what it gives you is if you have someone who's worked in Django, and say you're running a startup and you're looking for another developer, and you decided Django was the way to go. Django REST framework, you're like, that's our backend, and you're like, oh, we need to hire this guy's just quit because he wants to go hike around Japan for the next year. I've got to find a new replacement person. You're like, where am I going to go? Oh, there's this person I found. They've had experience in Django. If they've had experience in Django, they will know exactly where everything goes because it's so opinionated and it forces you to do it one particular way. One of the unexpected benefits of that is onboarding is really quick and consistency is high because of that opinionated process. So like, whilst some people might say it's too much hand holding, or it's like babying the developer, what it actually is doing is giving you high consistency, high hireability, and low onboarding time, which is really good. It also helps with like smashing shit out really fast, which is cool. All right, does that kind of make sense? Do we have any questions? Like when we get, yeah?
So it was just a question about serializers.
Yes.
Do they just turn JSON XML into like something that's suitable for your models? Something like that?
Yes, and a bit more than that. So there's two types of serializers. Well, there's two major types of serializers. There's a serializer, and there's a thing called a model serializer. So the serializer is the generic one. This is a common pattern you'll find in lots of Django things, and Django REST framework is very similar. You'll have a very like low-level way of doing it, and then a more generic helper way of doing the same thing, and then a really like low-touch way of doing the same thing. So you'll have tiers. You can with a view, you can abstract it with a class. So say there's a generic, well, it's a list API view, I think it's called, which will give you a generic one. You can basically give that a serializer and a model, and it will build everything you need to do all the interactions with those two bits of information, really. And then if you wanted to go even more, there's a thing called a view set where you just give it the model and the serializer, and it will figure out how to do a list, how to do a create, how to do a delete, how to do an update. It'll map it all for you. So it'll with like 3 lines of code, it'll give you everything. Or you could write a function where you define all the interactions by hand. That'll be like 400 lines of code if you wanted to do it that way, if you needed to do it that way. So there's ways to like break the problem down in complexity. So to get back to models or serializers and model serializers, the serializer is an interface which takes in JSON and it gives you back Python is probably the better way of putting it. So it's taking in what its expected input is. It's converting that into Python so you can interact with it in your Python code. And then when you're done, you can return it as JSON again back to the user. So it goes both ways. You can put Python in and put JSON out, or you can use it to take JSON in, parse the JSON, validate it, make sure it's all what you're expecting those inputs to be. So you can put your input restrictions there and how you filter or what the user's input constraints are. So your types and your range constraints, those sorts of things. That'll validate it, and if it passes, it'll give you the JSON. It'll give you the Python version of it, and if it fails, it will crash, essentially. So that's what that is. The model validator is that, but instead of defining what all the fields are and what the validations are itself, because you've already defined what the fields for your data model are, you can just go use the data model and then you don't have to write anything. So is that, I kind of answered 3 questions in one. Yeah. So it's both the input and the output. Yeah. Yeah. It's the bridge to it's the bridge to how you communicate with the user. Yeah. It's like yeah.
Do you use anything like MyButters to generate the model?
Do I use anything like?
MyButters. It's a database object. What do you call it? Creator, I think.
Oh.
Springboard.
No, I haven't. To generate the models.
For database objects, database relational.
Oh, so like I haven't personally. There might be a way to do it if you're importing like your existing like definition of what the database looks like. There might be a way to do that. There might be a tool for it. I have gone the other way where I've built a database and then turned that into models. There's a way to do that. You interpret an existing database and it spits out what the Django models will look like. That was an interesting time. Only because the database I was using was like an ERP system, so it had 40,000 tables. So and I had to go through them by hand because none of them made sense. So it was a fun time. But you can, there probably is a way. I just am not familiar with it. For me, to be honest, I find it easier for me to write a Django model than it is for me to write an ERP. So quite often what I would do is I'd write the Django models, create the database, and then build the documentation off the database. Because I'm like, yeah, that's easy enough for me. I can do it that way. I guess to give you an example, are we like lunching soon? Okay, cool. I'll keep just blabbering on. To give you a pretty good example of how Django can be useful, my brother found himself in the position where he was working for a guy who ran a national courier company. The guy that ran the national company went bankrupt. My brother was like filling in while he was at uni. He was the state manager for this guy, and he went bankrupt not because of this business, from one of his other ventures went bad. And my brother was in the position where he was essentially, the guy said, I can't pay you, I can't pay my staff, but if you get a business loan out and you get enough money to pay everyone's wages, I'll give you the company. So he just got a company kind of given to him, and all the state managers kind of had this done for this company. So he ended up with this thing, and he had this problem where he was like, I can't track my invoices and my ticketing system. I need a system to help me track it. And so we sat at dinner, and I got my laptop out, and we were talking about the problem while we were eating dinner. And by the time we finished dinner, I built him his invoicing and ticketing management system that lasted him 4 years. And I didn't really modify it too much after that one time. So Django can be really powerful. You can smash stuff out in very short amounts of time once you kind of get your feel of how it all comes together. And that, the opinionated part is probably the thing that makes it, it can be really difficult to get your head around. It can be really scary because it's so opinionated and it's got so much magic. There's a lot of magic that happens in Django world. But once you get over that, that's the stuff that speeds you up. It's your blessing and your curse.
We should go through the back end part of README. Remember in the README I said before?
Oh, the bit, okay, yes. Yep. The bit you were actually talking about. Am I in the right direction? Oh, this isn't the right one at all. One? All right, how's that? Is that visible? Yes. Cool, thank you. All right, is that pretty good? the back end part. Where are we up to? Down,
Below, yeah.
down. Setting up the back end.
That's it, yeah.
Bash. Who's actually using Bash?
Oh, sorry, I think the one before. was
Yeah.
the-
Oh, the one
the
before.
one after, sorry.
This bit with all the back end stuff.
The app name, Django.
Yep.
Yeah. Just for the environment, I think.
Oh, yeah. In your directory, so if I have a look at someone's, I've got team 4 up here in 4, that's convenient. If I have a look in here and I go server, is it in server? Env?
It should be in server.
No, it's not, it's in the root. Env. What?
It should be in server.
Env prod example. All right, let's have a look. Env example, yeah, it is in server. All right, so if I go into server here and we go bat env example, so this is all there already. So where are we? That, Django, super user, those bits. That's like, yeah, those bits are there. What this is in the settings.py file. So if I go back to, what directory was I in? Vanilla Django 6. All right. In here, we were, I was saying how in this settings py is where all your settings are going to be. It's not always a good idea to, in fact, it's often a bad idea to like hard code variables, right? Like if you're wanting, specifically in Django, so in Django in your settings file, there's a secret key. The secret key is the encryption salt that's used to encrypt all of the passwords. So if that was published to, say, GitHub publicly, every one of your passwords, if someone grabbed your database, they could extract out what the actual original, well, you don't want it there. So that's a really good example of one of these situations. The other really good example for why you might change things is, like debug. Debug is a setting you don't want to run in production, but you do want to run locally. So rather than having a static setting in your settings file, you have, who's worked with environment variables in anything, in Python before?
Should be in our Agile. Anyone who's in our Agile
Should have done it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
But I think quite a few people here haven't used it.
okay. Well, let's talk about it. Bat server settings. Is my scroll going to work? Maybe if it's on the right computer. Yeah. All right. Cool. I can do this. All right. We're using a package called py.env, I think it's called, off the top of my head. .env is how you import it. Load.env is the function. Load.env is going to look for a .env file in your directory. And if that file is there, it will take the values out of it and use them as if they're environment variables. When you deploy this to production, you're probably going to have these values set in either a build pipeline or in your production environment. It'll inherit from where they are. Back in ye old times, before containers existed, you deployed the code directly to a server and the server would run it. So your server environment would be configured with what the values are for that server. So if you think about it in that space, the server that you're running on understands that it's a production server, and the server that's the test server understands it's a test server. So when you put your code on one of those things, you don't need to you don't need to change your settings for whichever one. It just inherits from the environment variables which one it is. So that's where is it down here? The OS environ get. So environ's just a dictionary. It's Python converts the environment variables to a dictionary and it calls it environ. .get, you can get it. API secret key If, like all gets in Python, if you use get on a dictionary, the first thing's the key, the second thing's the default if it can't find it. So we're defaulting to, this is my super secret public and not very, my super public and not very secret key, which is just a placeholder to make sure it actually runs if you don't have the environment variable there. Again, debug. So if debug's not set, then it's determined to be on. If it's the app env is development, it will be on, and if the app env isn't set, it assumes it's development. That's a really bad way to do it because you're essentially defaulting to an insecure setting rather than a secure setting. But you guys will be on top of that, right? I actually put that in there, so that's me. So if any of you deploy to production and it's still in development, you can go, Ben, you're an asshole. Allowed hosts. So allowed hosts is essentially just what host it's allowed to run on. So it expects what it's going to be. That's just a Django thing. The other one that's really important was, where's cause? Cause. So I mucked around with this one a little bit. Cause allowed origins. So I've basically sort of created an empty list, but then I'm adding things to it. So in the README, I think there was a point there which was your front end URL. Yeah, so front end URL will tell the server which front ends are allowed to talk to it. And that's what cause is essentially. It's the back end is like pre set up to understand which front ends it should be talking to. So I've got it just set up like if debug, just allow localhost. Like you're probably going to be, hopefully you're running on 3000. If you're not running on 3000, then that's going to be a really useless setting. But if debug's on, it's just going to add those two local ones to it. So even if you're on production and you need to just go, oh, I don't know why production's broken, I'm not getting any error messages, let's turn debug on production really quick. Bang, debug's on. All right, now I can localhost from, I can run my local version of my React front end, isn't it? Yeah. Yep, I can run my local React thing, point it to prod, figure out what's going on because I can debug it locally. So that might be useful. And if the front end set it there. I basically stuck that in because originally it was just crashing when you tried to run it. So I went, well, let's make it run at least. Templates, we should have deleted that because you don't need them. Maybe it might be used for the admin section, but I don't think so. Anything else? The Postgres section up here, if you end up moving to Postgres for when you deploy, that will help you out. That's the Postgres, so all the OS environs are there. The fact these are gets, the fact they're written like that's really interesting actually. Because the or Postgres, you would have just gone stat comma Postgres, but yep, but I like it. It's actually, I've never seen that, but I think it's a nice way to write it. It looks pretty. It's like English. That's kind of cool. So that database will work. So these are the settings that are in your README. They're also in the .env template that's in the server directory. I'm pretty sure the instructions just say copy that file and call it .env. So that, yeah, if you do that, that's all you really need to do, I think, for the setup. By default, we're going to use a database called db.sqlite3 or SQLite3. Has anyone used SQLite before? Yeah, a few people. Who's never written a SQL query before? No, you're all done SQL? All right, cool. Well, it's, SQLite is essentially just a file-based SQL. So you can open a file and run commands against it as if it's a database, and it just means you don't have to run a server.
Does Django's migrations still work if you switch to Postgres or something?
Yes, you can switch between SQLite MySQL, all the MySQL variants, Postgres variants, Microsoft SQL, Oracle. I think it does every relational database. The Oracle one is tricky because it's a little, it's not as well supported, but no one here is going to be using Oracle, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, if I've used it, I've actually used Django as a tool to migrate from MySQL to Postgres, not using it for a Django site, just because I can go, all right, set up Django, interpret the database, grab all the data, export it. So you can actually export all the data not as a generic, essentially. So even the foreign keys will be broken up into what they actually represent. And then you can use those JSON files once you migrate to the new database to just import all the data, and it just boom, which was quite impressive. Cool. Any other questions about, yeah. Have you guys used, that's weird. I'm going to fix that. Yeah, cool. Yep.
Yeah. Any more questions?
I'm gonna.
Otherwise, you can come annoy him at lunch.
Yeah, you can totally annoy me at lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm going to muck around with things while you guys are eating.
Who here hasn't done agile web dev before? Okay.
Oh, it's a
quite
few.
good number of people then. By the way, that secret key thing, like using environment variables, biggest call out if you are a vibe coder, because they do not give a shit if you use latency. They will just put your keys into like the
Source code.
Yeah, into
Yep.
the source code.
They'll commit it straight to
Git.
Git.
A mark specifically to using like .env file. Like, do not forget that, because that is surprisingly, I don't know how people get past. Like, I don't know how people get through that unit and not know about like using secret keys and using environment variables, but it's very important. So probably good to know now, especially because if people vibe code, it will just put your keys. Like if you just search like open API key on GitHub, there's so many people who vibe code and just put their keys there. It's everywhere.
It will take less, I can't remember what the time is. It is ridiculous. It's less than a minute. I think it's sort of like 5 or 6 seconds after you've pushed a key to GitHub for someone to have scanned it. There are hooks people can use that watch everything that gets pushed to GitHub, and they watch for keys, especially Azure, Google Cloud, AWS keys. Within hours, someone will be accessing your AWS account and they will be putting stuff there to mine crypto.
Okay.
But having said, one other thing, just when you're talking about vibe coding, being really opinionated as a framework is really quite, so Django's sort of coming back into its own in a couple of ways. And one of them is that the high opinionated way of doing things really works well with models. So they can, like the way that agents will generate the code, because it's so opinionated, is more likely to be correct in a Django world. Yeah, cool.
That's good. Lunch would be the other thing.
So if I look at my tree, I've got my server, I've got my manage.py document, I've got my health check folder. If you're in VS Code, you'll see it, right? You'll see this stuff.
This is insane.
You need to be in terminal though, so make sure you have a terminal open and you're in this directory in your terminal, so good call out. If you're here, type uv sync --all -groups. Yep. All right, I'm going to write uv run manage.py migrate. That's going to create my database for me. So what's happened here is Django's gone and created a whole lot of database tables for us. So each one of those applying is a table. You'll see there's auth, admin, a bunch of auth migrations, and a thing called sessions. So Django will hold its sessions. So you've got some session data you can hold in there. That's state for when the user's logged in. Cool. That's because Django gives us stuff out of the hood. Who's not up to this? All right. And to make sure it works, we're going to run uv run manage.py run server. And we should get that going. It should look like this. It should say new servers running at 127.0.0.1.8,000. If you open it, it should look like that, hopefully. Python, you can use Python instead if you've activated your virtual environment. If you haven't activated the virtual environment, it won't work. And because I know there's someone here who hasn't, I'm just using the UV commands. You can actually, if you've got it, are you running in a Linux mode? Oh, okay. Then Python will work in Windows.
Are we supposed to go in the virtual environment or not?
If you want to, you can, but all the commands won't matter. UV will use your virtual environment already. So that I'm writing UV run in front of everything instead because that forces it to make sure. Removes the chance of it being a problem. If it was me and I was doing this by myself, I would not be doing that. But UV understands the environment it's created for you, and so when you use it to run a command, it will run it inside the environment, whether it's active or not. We're going to go API/health check. You're getting a different error message. This is actually quite good. This one says there's nothing found at API/health check. That's because it's actually API health check ping. So we're going to put ping on the end and do it again. And it's going to give us Pong. And that's just its way of proving its life. So, we've already got that. So where does that come from is probably the first thing. And that's what we'll dive into. So I'm using PyCharm because I like PyCharm. You guys are in VS Code, but it should look roughly the same. In our settings file, you'll see this, in the server, in our server folder, I'm just going to refer to everything that's in the server folder. And so the server folder is what I refer to when I say server. Does that make sense? That was the weirdest sentence. All right, URLs, urls.py in server. So server.urls. This is, in Python world, you refer to files with dot notation, so it's folder.filename. So we're looking at server.urls. Server.urls, what's in here? We've got /admin. /admin is using admin site URLs. And we have an API/health check, and that's doing a thing called include. It's including health check URLs, healthcheck.urls. Does anyone have a guess at what healthcheck.urls might be? Healthcheck is the folder, .urls is the file. So folder.file. If you've got lots of folders, it's folder.folder.folder.file. And if there's something inside the file, it might be folder.folder.file.classname or something. It's just how Python dot notation works. So in this health check folder above, we've got it's an application. So before, when I showed you a vanilla Django project and a vanilla Django application, the application, when we created it, had the admin directory, an admin file, an apps file, a models file, a test file, and a views file. We've added a URLs file. It's very common to add a URLs file. The URLs is essentially, rather than having one enormous list in your project file, so in server.urls, rather than having every URL that you route to there, you can have your application-specific URLs in the application directory in its urls.py, and then just inherit that or defer to that in the server rules. Top one is the server, and the bottom one is health check. This is in the server URLs. The server URLs is our base config one. So when a request comes in to, so when you, as a web browser, send a request to this server, this is a great time to have a slide where it shows you what a HTTP request looks like, but you don't need to know about that. It's going to have some headers. It's going to have a URL or a path. a resource, and it's going to have some other bits and pieces. And more importantly, it's going to have a, I can't remember what the term is now, a mode or a method, which is like, get, post, patch, put, delete, head, options. I think that's all of them. So you're going to send your GET request, which is your typical browser request. It's going to come in here. It's going to hit this first file. It's going to hit server.urls. It's going to come through this, and it's going to look for a matching path. So the first time we booted this up, we didn't give it any path at all, and it said 404. Couldn't find it, no file, don't know what you're talking about. But because we're in debug mode, it gave us a lovely little screen which said, did you mean one of these things that you've defined because you haven't told me? And then we said, oh yeah, we wanted API health check. And then we put that in, and it gave us another 404. But it also gave us a different one. It suggested a different thing. It suggested maybe we're after pings. And that's where this comes in, this pings. So it came through. It did match this. So it said, oh, API health check, that's where you're at. Cool. Well, API health check is handled by this file, healthchecksfolder.urls.py. So urls.py, that's this file. So this file is the file which has all the definitions for anything that's there. So API health check anything comes down here and then gets matched here. So API health check, well, there's nothing that matches that because there's nothing there that's blank. So we're going to look for what's in here. What do we find? Ping. So we've thrown ping in the end of it. Now it works because we found a path. We've gone to this view. This view has returned us our content. And if we go and look at that view is really very simple. So what's it doing? It's an API view. It's expecting a GET. So we're basically saying, if you get a GET, handle it with this method. If we sent that same URL a post, it would fail because it has no idea how to handle it. It only understands how to handle a GET. As I said before, the types of HTTP query are GET, POST, PUT, PATCH, DELETE, head. You don't need to know about the other ones. Once you get to delete, that's pretty much it. And they're your REST transactions, essentially. The internet before, these always existed, but for about 15 years, no one used anything except for GET and POST because we didn't realize we could do more than that. I don't know, someone forgot to educate the world that there were other ones in the standards, but now we have more. So GET is what you do when you're just trying to retrieve some information. The others are what you're trying to do when you're trying to mutate or create information. So POST is to create something new. PUT or patch is to modify. Delete is to delete. So that's your CRUD stack. So this is basically going, cool, here's our request. Requests is Django magic. That's just everything that requests is a collection of, pretty sure it's a dictionary of dictionaries of the information that came through from the request, the original one. So what path were you after? What were the headers? Did you send us any JSON content along with this? Did you, what browser are you using? Like anything you might want to know about the request is in the request. Any state, any user. So before this step, Django does some magic middleware. So Django's already authenticated the user. It's already figured out whether this person is a user or not, if they're anonymous, if they've got access to groups, it's gone through all the stacks of who this person is, contextualizing that. That'll show up in request as well, request.user. And then we're returning a HTTP response with the content Pong, with a status 200, which is why we're getting that plain text. It's not even HTML, it's just the word Pong. Just Pong, 200, we're okay. Cool. Shall we start talking about models? Right. One of the things in Django that when I've taught people who are doing their first project, one of the things that will inevitably come along is you are going to want to do something different with the user class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use UV and I'm going to create, I'm going to start an app. So start app, and I'm going to give this app a name. What are you guys working on? Maybe I'm going to make this a feedback form. I'm just going to call this feedback. You guys don't follow along with this for the moment. We'll do a more complex one together that'll actually be helpful for you.
Is this for the model name?
This is mucking around with models, but this is the app. So I'm creating an app called feedback. I'll show you what it's going to do. So now if I run tree, you'll see I've got the server directory, I've got a health check, and I've got a feedback directory now at the top. And feedback's got an admin and apps, typical stuff you see, models, test, views, right? So what are we going to do? I'm going to create a feedback model, and hopefully this will make some sense. So we'll see how we go. So following along, models. So the models files automatically got from Django DB import models. This is pretty standard because we're going to use that for any model we create. So I would say at this point in time, push your keyboard away from you just to make sure you're actually following along and not tempted to type. So we're going to create a class called feedback. This is how we're going to create our database table. So feedback. Feedback's going to have, what are we going to have? Like a rating. A rating, it's going to be an integer field. Yeah, we won't let people give 5.5 or 4.5. We'll have a rating. It's going to have, can I do a min? I can't remember now if I can. Constraints. Max length's not a thing, computer. All right, I'm just going to make it an integer field. I'm also going to make it required. I might have some text for the feedback. That's going to be a text field. I'm going to make this blank and null equals true, which means it's allowed to be empty, essentially. And it's going to complain. Why are you complaining? What have I done wrong? Sure. Why? It's probably because you can't do it for a text field. Maybe. Let's find out. Maybe I can do null equals true. No, I'll just leave it blank. It's allowed to be blank text. But that's how you do a null. I need something that's nullable now. Let's go. Give me something that you'd put in a feedback form. Like, what would you, if you were giving feedback other than some text and a rate? The text would be the definition, yeah?
Positive, negative.
Positive, negative. All right, that's pretty good. Would that be part of the rating system, maybe?
Do you recommend?
Oh, I like that.
And
Recommend.
make that a bool?
Yeah, I wasn't after a bool. I'm trying to find a good character string sort of one. No, usually I'm going to get somewhere else.
Location?
Title.
Yeah, location. We can do location. Location, you can put in where you were. Yeah, all right. We're going to have a max length of 255. So character fields in Django require a maximum length. So in your database, a varchar, so the difference between a text, so text field is a text which is a large text field. A char field is a character field which is a variable character record in a database. So you need to define how long that is, so that's why that's there. This one I'm going to go blank equals true and null equals true, which allows it to be none. It hates it. Why is my thing? All right, I'm going to ignore that. And I'm going to put a timestamp, which is when it was created. Actually, I'm going to call this created at there. And maybe updated at as well. I'll allow people to update it. Cool. All right, does that make sense? So I've got a ID is automatic. So you don't need to muck around with IDs. I'll show you that in a bit. So we've got a feedback field. We've got a bunch of nullables. We've got a text field that's just open and an integer field, which is our rating. If I was spending more time, I would look up the docs and go, how do I make that integer a maximum of 10 and a minimum of 0? But I'm not doing that right now, so we won't worry about it. Cool. All right. So let's go have some fun. The first thing, actually, I'll do this the wrong way, and we'll have a look. So I'm going to go Python manage py. Oh, no, I'm not. Sorry, I'm going to go uv run manage .py and shell. Cool. So 6 objects imported automatically. The Django shell is basically an interactive Python REPL. Have you seen the Python REPL before? Have you mucked around with the interactive terminal for Python? Essentially just runs Python live. And so there's a bunch of stuff that's imported. So I can have a look at, say, where were we? I can look at views or from, what was that thing, health check? Why is that not working? Anyway, I don't have a model yet. I was going to show you how this breaks, but in the new Django shell, I don't think you can actually do this, but I'll give it a go. What did I call that? Feedback dot models import feedback. And it's not going to work because it's not going to be able to find it. And it's going to give me a pretty good error message. It's saying that the app doesn't declare an app label and it isn't in application in installed apps, which is true. It's not. It's telling me that I forgot how to do something. I did this wrong intentionally to go, this is something that you might need to notice when you build these. You do have to come into settings. You do have to come down to this installed apps. And installed apps tells Django which folders or which modules. So some of these, like Django contrib, these are packages that come as part of Django. REST framework, which is in this list, that is a Python package we've downloaded as part of our UV sync. Course headers is another package, but that's the folder name, the module name. So this is what Django will import. Health check is one, and we've just created feedback. So let's throw feedback in there. All right, now if I come back into here and try and run my shell again, I should be able to go from, what was it, feedback dot models, import feedback. Was it all okay? Cool. Feedback dot, so feedback is a class. We can see it's a class. Django has a few things that it does to get access to the objects that are in the table. We use objects, so dot objects. And we're going to go dot all. And that would normally give us everything that's in the database which matches that, but it's going to fail. Oh, objects. It's going to fail. It's going to fail because there's no such table. I'm doing this the long broken way because this is also something that you're going to have to remember to do. Manage.py make migrations. Oh, that's because I haven't got UV running. UV run manage. All right, it's created, so make migrations has created this new file. If I have a look, I'm just going to bat this. Bat is a fancy version of cat for those that have used cat. It just colorizes things to make it better, so that's why I use it. So this is made a migration. It's saying we're going to have this thing called feedback, table called feedback. It's automatically got an ID that's a big int. It's auto-created primary key. Don't serialize it. And a verbose name is ID. And we've got a rating, text, location. So these are the SQL definitions, right? Cool, that's our migration. We're going to, I'm gonna do that all the time. Migrate this, so manage.py, migrate. We've added our new table. If I was to go into the schema for our SQLite document, you would have seen that's now changed. But now I can go back into shell, uv run manage shell, and I can do my, well, because Django's updated, I think it's automatically there. So if I just go feedback, it should already be there. It automatically imports all the models for you now, so you don't have to do it manually. That's new since I used Django last, so that's just on me. So now if I go feedback.objects.all, we should see an empty set. It's not actually an empty list, it's an empty query set. So one of the things that Django does to help you out is that the query that you're giving Django is lazy. So you can go, like I could give like a variable feedback.objects.all, and that will be a query waiting to get all objects. And it won't execute until it actually needs to get the data out of it. And then I could take that same, so say it was x equals feedback.objects.all, and on the next line I can go x.filter only submitted in the last month or something. I can put another filter on it. It won't do the first query and then filter it. It'll wait until you've put everything in, and when you actually try and use the data, that's when the query will run. It'll only execute at the last moment. So you can do some stuff there. That's why it's a query set. There's also nothing in it. So let's try and give some feedback. Objects.create. That's weird. Why is that doing it? And that's going to tell me there's a whole lot of stuff missing. So what do we need to put in here? We needed a rating. Someone give me a rating. 3. All right, someone give me a, what did I say, text?
Yeah.
What's the text?
Try blank.
Oh, you want to just throw blank? That's good. Yeah, we want to test that. Did anything else I needed to give, or was it all pretty automated? I think it was all automated, right?
Location.
Location, that could be blank, I think. There's 2 ways of doing this. What I'm doing right now is I'm creating it directly in the database, but what I might do is try and do it as a class. It's been a moment since I've done this. Yeah, all right, so feedback that. I'm going to call this F1, and it's going to be called that. So I've got my F1 here, which is a feedback object. If I go F1.rating, it should be 3, yeah, it is. But so cool, I've created a feedback item. So if I go feedback objects all, we should see it in our list, right? No, it's empty. It's empty because I've created an object, but it's, well, sorry, I've created a feedback class item. It's not a database thing yet. There's an abstraction there, right? If I was to do that objects.create that I was originally doing, that would have created it in the database and then loaded it. But I didn't do that. I went, we can do it this way. So I'm kind of just explaining how that works. So if I go f.save, or F1. I love the new error system. F1, so F1 is a feedback object. It now says it's feedback object 1. It didn't say that before. It said feedback object none because it had no ID. And so it's aware of its ID. And if I go feedback objects all, I'll get that. So if I go for F in feedback objects all, f.rating. Oh, that's not going to work because it needs to print it. Ooh. Oh well. Oh no, it does work. Cool. It's going to go 3 because there's only one thing. It's 3. I could go feedback.objects.create, and we're going to have a rating of 5, and we're going to have a text of Ben's demo is going so well. And I'm going to have a location of, what's this place called? E something, E zone. And we're going to create that directly in, bang. Cool. So now I run my thing. We go F rating and F dot text and maybe F dot created at, boom. All right, we've got 3, we've got blank, we've got when that was, and another date time. Django's times are all time zone aware. They're not naive. They're all time zone aware. They have to be. And typically they'll be in UTC, unless you set it otherwise. Cool. Does that make sense? Right. So that's that, but it's not super useful just yet. What we are lacking is who actually submitted that, right? So maybe we should change that. So Django gives us some tools. So if I go from django.contrib.auth, I can import a tool called getUserModel, and I'm going to just go user equals getUserModel. There are different ways of doing this. This is the Django fancy way for people that do it. There's you can potentially use a different user model than the one that is in the box. So if someone creates a new user model, then your code will fail. So this just shorthand. Just trust me, it's a smart thing to do. We're going to go author equals, well, there you go, models, foreign key, user. Django, when you do a foreign key, so foreign key is a reference to another table, it requires an on delete. And so that says, if the thing I'm linking to is deleted, what do I do? So you have some options. You have cascade, you have set null, I think it is, and you have block or something like that. You can look up the docs. The wording might be different, but that's what they are. The cascade means if the user gets deleted, these feedback items the user has created will also be deleted along with that user. Anything the user has done will get removed. If we set it to null, then essentially it just says the author doesn't exist anymore. They're a null author. We don't know who they are. If we set it to block, or whatever that word is that means block, it says you can't delete that user because they have blocked items that you need to sort out first. So it depends on what level of data integrity you care about. You might happily have all of your reviews deleted if the user deletes their account, but you might also go, well, actually, we want your content even if you delete your account, so we'll set it to null. Or we might say, well, as long as you've got content, you're not allowed to delete your account. That's up to you guys. So we've made a change to our models. So we have to go back here and do our migrations again. So UV run, make migrations. And it's going to tell me that it's impossible to add a non-nullable field author to feedback without specifying a default. So because I have said that you have to have an author, you can't not. It can't be a nullable field. I didn't say null equals true. By default, null equals false on everything, or nullable is allowed to be null equals false. Your migration is going to say, hey, in order for me to go forward, you're going to have to give me a default value. So I'm going to give it, you can either quit and try and fix it, but I'm going to give it an option. I'm going to give it the number 1. And this is probably going to fail because I don't think I've set up a user yet, have I? Yeah, look at that, dead. Can't work. So UV run manage create super user, and let's create a super user. From memory, it's admin, and it's admin. Oh, I don't know what it is. Let's have a quick look. Bat-env. It's password 123 admin@test.com. All right, that's pretty easy. Admin@test.com. Password 123. Oh, user might be there. Let's just find out. U1 equals user.objects.first. And I go U1. We've got admin. But if I go U1 feedback set .all. So you can go in other direction. This is telling me that as a user, my user1, has given 2 feedback items because that foreign key goes both ways, yeah? So from the user, I can see which feedback records have been created by this user, and from the feedback, I can see the user itself. So I can go f1.user.username, and it'll, excuse me. Did I call it author? Author.username is admin. I can go author first name. It's going to tell me that I typed that wrong. First name is blank because we never set one. I can go f1.author.email and it'll give me the email address. So you can go down, progressively down the chain and back up the chain if that's the thing. Is that kind of making sense as to how models work? I've explained how you structure the model, how it is an abstract but referential of what's in the database, how migrations get created, how the foreign keys will link across certain things, how required fields won't let you migrate unless you give defaults. It's pretty good, yeah?
You need to worry about relationships here?
This is also a relationship.
Like
Different types. I was about to do a one-to-one example.
Okay.
There's a many-to-many I could talk about.
One-to-many?
One-to-many is this.
Okay.
So this is a foreign key. So one, you can have one, a record can only have one author,
yeah.
but an author can have many records. And that was the back and forth.
Yeah.
So that user feedback all, many,
Yeah.
the author F1, the feedback author
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So when you're doing a many, Django gives you a relationship manager. So you can see with feedback set, if I go back here, feedback set will say this is a related manager. So related manager is the tool that Django gives you to figure out how to deal with them. And you deal with them in much the same way that you would a query. So when I did objects first, objects all. You're saying, give me all of the objects, that query set, but I want this particular chunk. So either filter or the first one, last one, all of them. So you can do the same thing with the feedback because the query related manager works the same way. So I can go first and that'll give me just one feedback item. I can go last and that'll give me a different one. And I can go feedback.filter. I only want to have feedback where the rating was greater than 2 or 3. Greater than equals 3. That seems good. And that's giving me 1 because we had one with 3 and one with 5. So it's only giving me the one with 5. So you can put in your filters there. That filtering works the same way. So the documentation I would look at for this, which is probably the important one, model field reference. This page is like one of the things you're going to be looking at constantly when you're mucking around with anything to do with models. I will typically have this open at all times. Even now, even with close to 20 years experience in Django, I do not memorize the settings. I just look at this. I'm looking at how my many-to-many field works. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to look at the many-to-many field. The documentation's pretty good. If I'm coming up trying to figure out what was going on with that text field example, up here somewhere there'll be text fields. So this is all the fields. Char field, date field, file field, email. So email will automatically do all your email validation for you. Float's a float, JSON's JSON data. Slug fields, kind of a fun, interesting one. URL fields do URL validation to make sure it's valid. You can actually also get Django to check the URL validates and is real. So like you can say, if this is a public internet URL that you're meant to be giving me, go and actually ping it and like see if you get a response that works and it's not a 404, So you can actually validate it's a accessible thing. So there's a bunch of these durations, which is the length of time. What was I confused about before? Text field. So I go down to text field. It's going to tell me what's available in the text field settings. And it's going to say there's actually not that much here. You specify a max length. It will be reflected in the text area. But it will not be enforced in the database. Interesting. So when it presents it on the screen, it will do it differently. That's what it's saying. I also wanted to know about integers and how I could positive integer. Was there a way for me to set a limit on how high a value was? I can't see that. Positive int. Where's int? No, not there. Function home. I'm just looking at things now. I probably shouldn't be because we don't have a lot of time for me to muck around with this. You can set a bunch of things, uniques as well. So like unique is a thing you can add if you essentially want to put an index on there that says there only can be one of these values in the database. So if you're setting up categories, for instance, you don't want there to be the same category referenced twice. There's also unique for a period of time. So you might only want one of these entries a day. You might only want one a month. There's some other bits and pieces in there. Choices, like if you want it to limit to a certain number of choices, you can give it choice values and say you're only allowed to have one of these items. So it could be a character field in the database, but you only want them to have, yes, no, maybe as a response. Cool. Does that make sense? Some stuff in there.
How do you customize the user?
How do you customize a user? That's what I was about to get into. So this is where we're going to start following along. All right.
Do you want them to go and try and make their own models now first?
I thought maybe what I'd do is we'd muck around with user profiles. You guys can follow along with that. And then after that, hopefully you'll have a bit more of an idea and you can muck around for a bit. How much time we got? Not a lot, like 2 hours?
Yeah.
Less than?
2 and, well, it's actually just 1.5.
1.5 hours? How about we do this follow along and then we do views and we do serialize. We'll do serializers and views.
Okay.
And then we'll see. How are you guys feeling about that? We lost a lot of time this morning. I blame my cat.
So everyone, do they need to?
Yeah.
create the app?
So are you in your app directory, in the server directory in your app? Yes? Yes, chef?
In server.
In server, in the first server directory, not the server, the server one. The one with manage.py, that's the important bit. uv run manage.py start app. So remember start app, you're going to use that a few times in this project, I suspect. So an application in Django is essentially a way to segment the complexity of your code. So creating a new application isn't a big deal. Apps can talk to each other. There's no reason not to do it. It's essentially a way for you to try and segment out how complex you're getting. So if you're creating an inventory management component for your site, you'd probably have an inventory app. If you're creating a lending component for that inventory, you'd probably create a lending app, and the lending app would reference the inventory data. That's fine. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, I'm going to start an app. I'm going to call it user_profile. And you should do the same thing. So uv run manage.py start app user_profile. In Python, you cannot have hyphens in your package names, so don't use hyphens in your folder names. Python doesn't like it. It treats hyphens as minus symbols. Right, we're going to go into our newly formed user profile directory. And we're going to go into models. We're going to create our model. All right. Class, profile. It's almost like I've done this before. Models, model. All right. That's our first thing. Cool. All right. What are we going to put in our profile? I think like a bio. Bio, so text field. Do we need anything else?
Location.
Age?
Age.
Do we need an age? Do we care? Age equals models.positive integer field. Do we require the user to give us an age, or can it be null? Can be null. Null equals true.
So this creates a unique ID automatically.
Yeah, it creates a unique ID. Well, there's a couple of things, but yes. always, IDs are automatic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that for every table? IDs automatic primary key?
Yeah. So Django's model system will automatically create you a unique ID, and it'll use whatever's set up in the settings, which is a big integer, in the file you've got, and by default that's what it is. If you wanted to have your own unique ID, you could create like say you wanted to use a UUID instead. You could use like a UUID field, and you could say primary key equals true, and the editable equals false, so you can't change it. And then Django will use UUIDs, which are your big long, I don't know what they are, 40 character long character text strings that are globally unique in the world. So if you needed to, for some reason, do something like that, or if you wanted to use alphabetical indexing rather than numeral for some reason, you can do it that way as well. So if you really want to put an ID in there, typically you do that. Actually, what I do is I call it ID still. Typically, Django uses ID as its ID field. You will make your life a little bit harder if you do that. So for this project, I'd say just don't touch ID. Just let ID be integers, let it do it itself. It gets tricky with things like many-to-manys because you start having to manually set the, it's not worth it. How's that? All right, we're also going to go and get our user object. So I'm going to go from Django.contrib auth get user model. Is this listening to me? Is this, which agent is installed? Maybe it's just figured it out from the context of, I have got the PyCharm gen tool active, so maybe it's figured it out. Cool, and I'm going to go user with a capital U because anything that's a class in Python always has a capital first letter. Well, it's Pascal cases, capitalized all the things. So user equals get user model. Cool, I'm going to speed up because I'm seeing people looking like they're bored. And I'm going to go user equals models, one-to-one field, user on delete, cascade. So if our user gets deleted, we're going to delete the profile. And that's what we're going to do. All right, we're going to go into admin. In our admin section, we're going to muck around with this for the first time. So in our admin section, I'm going to go admin.site register profile. That's exactly what I want. And yes, I do want to import it from user profile models profile, but I'm not going to do it that way. Do it that way. So what I should have done first is I should have said from .models import profile. What the dot means in Python is from this directory models. So dot is this directory, dot is the above directory. So from this directory models file, import the profile class. And then we're going to use admin.site.register to register this profile in our user section. Sweet. All right, now what are we going to do next? Is add it to your installed applications so Django knows where to look. So in your settings, installed applications, down the bottom, add user profile as a string. Good. We're going to do that again, make migrations. And what happened this time? Did it work? So we've made migrations. We're going to migrate, right? Migrate's next. Migrate. It should say applying user profile 0001 initial. You can actually give migrations a name. So if you've done something, you can actually name it. So it's not just initial. You could tell it what it is you're actually trying to do. That can be quite useful, especially if you're working in teams and you built some particular function. Sweet. Once you've done that, I'm going to run server, which apparently was a long time ago. There it is. And I'm going to go look at my server. All right. How are you guys going? Yeah. Ah, have you got to the bit where you can't log in because you haven't created a user yet? I was waiting for someone to tell me they had a problem. All right, if you're up to that bit, we're going to go uv run manage.py create super user, and we're going to create a user. Now, create super user is going to walk you through the steps of how to create a super user. If you look at your env file, so if I go bat.env, you'll see that there's a couple of Django super user settings that it's expecting. I just use them to keep it the same so I don't forget what they are. You can put whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I'd probably put something nice and short so you can type it easy. Something you remember. I usually use test, test, and test. But create super user should walk you through the process. Yo.
What is that super user password?
So if you run, so if I was to load this, so I've got an app called direnv, and direnv is a Linux Mac tool that allows you to automatically load environment files. So it's loaded these. If I then do printenv and grep for Django, this will show me all of the environment variables that have Django in the name. So they're already there. I can use that to go run manage.py, create super user, no interactive. I'm not sure actually. Let me just check that. Help. No input. No dash input. And what no input does is it expects the variables to be given to it either by environment variables or not. So when you're running it in like a CI/CD pipeline, when you're deploying to prod, that's how you do it. It won't work for me because I've already created one. But if you have those environment variables loaded, it'll just do it.
Yeah, multiple or just one?
You can have multiple super users, so I can do uv run create, manage, create super user, and I can run through another one. I'm going to call this as bendog, and it's ben@bendog.org. It's my actual email address. I probably shouldn't put that into a thing. And I'm not putting my real password. Test. That's fine. And now I've got it. So now if I was to go into uv run manage.py shell, and I go user objects.all, you'll see I've got two users now. And they're both super users. So is that cool? All right. Now we go, I assume people have done uv run manage run server now. Yep. We're good. And when you open your server and you have a look at it, and go to the admin, so server/admin. I don't know if you can see that. It's a very small font up the top. But localhost or whatever it is, :8000/admin. And it should, after you log in, you should see something like this. Yes? Yep, cool. All right, if we go look at users, we should see some users, yeah? Yep. If we look at groups, you should see some no groups. There's no groups, we haven't created any. That's normal. If we look at profiles, it's empty. There's a trick to this specifically for user profiles, and I'm going to run you through this one. And then you're probably only ever going to use it in this use case. So maybe follow along, but don't pay too much close attention. How's that? Yeah? All right, we're going to go into our models again. So back into users, models, user profile models. And underneath profile, we're going to add some extra stuff. Actually, I'm probably going to import some things first. So let's import some stuff. So I'm going to go up the top here. I'm going to say from django.db.models.signals import post save. Hopefully that's legible despite the yellow squiggly line underneath it. And I'm going to go from Django dispatch import receiver. And when we're done with that, I'm going to use a thing called a decorator. Have you guys seen decorators in Python? Oh, you've used Flask, right? If you've used Flask, you've probably seen a decorator. It sits on top of a function and it modifies what the function does. So in this thing, I'm going to use the receiver that I just imported, and I'm going to go post save, comma, sender equals user. And then I'm going to define a function. It's going to be create or update user profile. And I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go profile get or create user equals instance. So what we're trying to do here, this is something that you're only really going to use in this use case. So I thought it was fair to get you guys to write it and follow along for this one, because this bit's probably a once-off. The profile is something you're probably going to definitely use, but the receiver and signal is something that really gets limited to when you're trying to do something asynchronously. So what signals are in Django is Django gives you the option to be able to essentially when a model saves and modifies the database, Django will create a signal. So it's a pub-sub kind of process. So it creates a signal, and you can create a receiver which listens for a particular signal. So with this @receiver decorator, we've said we are looking at the post-save messages, and in those post-save messages, we're only caring about the sender being the user class. So anything that the user class creates, we want to know when it saves. So anytime a user saves, we want to run this additional steps. And this additional step is basically saying, for our profile class, our profile model, get or create, which is a really useful helper method that Django gives you, that will create if it doesn't exist, or get you what's in the database and return that. And so we're just saying, like, if it exists, don't worry about it, we don't care. But if it doesn't exist, create it for me. Yeah? And so once this is saved, we don't need to migrate, because this is logic, this isn't database changing, it's not changing a schema, so the migrations don't matter. But we should potentially now, if I run server, I'm not sure if it does it, if it's smart enough to backfill, but let me see if it does. Or not so much yet. But if I go into my users and I find one of these guys and I give this a name and I save it now, save, it's saved, and in my profile, I now have a profile. I probably should have gone with the first user, so my objects lined up. So object 1 was object 1. Like now it's going to be 2 references 1 and 1 references 2, but that's fine. It's not a big deal. Cool. So if you've gone into your admin, or whatever you called your super user account, and you've modified it, you should now see a profile in there. Yeah? Yep. And that profile should be empty. Should look like this. It should reference your user, whatever your username was. I'm actually going to change mine so it references number 1, so that's good. I can fit. Oh, lies. 1 second. That's because I didn't say blank equals true. Blank equals true. And blank equals true. One of the things about the Django admin is it cares differently for blank and null. So typically, if you're doing a null, you have to be blank as well. So if you run migrations, that's a dead giveaway. If you see no column or no table, it's because it's missing a thing. That's the hint. It's good to make mistakes though, because that's how you learn, and you guys will have to be figuring out a lot of your own debugging. So share your mistakes. Cool. Don't care too much about the 3 lines at the bottom. Well, you don't have to memorize them. Get or create's a really cool thing, but you're only going to really use this for this one use case. Now you've learned how to do it this way. When you publish your repo project to GitHub and you show some future interviewer this code, they'll be like, hey, you wrote some really good auth models there. That's really impressive. I like your use of get user model. Which core developer did you learn that from? Yeah. I picked that up from the Django REST framework source code, actually. That's where I found out about it. I was like going through their stuff and I went, oh, user equals get user model. This is useful. So I stole it from them. I'm a contributor. This is a horrible brag because I did the smallest little contribution to Django REST framework. But when I first did the tutorial for Django REST framework a long, long time ago, they just released a new version and their docs were out of date with the source code. And I was like, why is this not working? So I went through the source code and went, oh, okay, I'll fix this. So I sent them a pull request to update their docs to match their actual functionality. And as a result of that, my GitHub's got the little Mars lander sticker because they use Django REST framework in the Mars rover project. And so I've been credited as one of the contributors to the Mars for my 6 lines of documentation updating. So one of the things that I might point out here is something I think is quite cool. If you go to profiles, this profiles list, yeah, like this is pretty useless. Like profile object 1 doesn't really give me a lot of hint as to what my profile is. So one of the things you do in your models, this is just a good thing to know about, is you can define string. I'm not in love with that. I'm going to just say this is profile and then string self user username. So this is referencing self. So you know, Django models are a class. So you can reference things the way you would. So self user username. The user is this, which is our reference, and so the user object and the object username. The username's the username of the thing. Right. So now I've added that. I'm just going to switch back here really quick and reload, and now it says admin rather than 1. So I've actually got a better definition of what that is. Dunder methods, if you haven't mucked around too much in Python before, a double underscore is what we call a dunder method. So double underscore methods or dunder methods are how a Python object relates to other functionality. So in this case, when we call string, we stringify something. So the str parentheses function, that thing will call whatever your class is dot dunder string to get whatever the string is of it. So whenever this is going to try and convert this class to a string, like to output it, it's going to use this command. So we've just given it instructions. If you're trying to make this a string, make it pretty so we can actually read it. Does that make sense? By default, it does like class name /index or ID. Cool, cool.